Welcome back to another episode of the Supply Chaney podcast. I am your host, Nathan Chaney, and today we're going to talk about the full cycle career concept that so many people seem to experience in the industry, especially if you talk to anybody in the industry. It's like once you get in, you're never going to get out, like some kind of like club situation. But in Brian's sort of case, that's kind of rings true, and I want to be able to share this story for folks that find themselves today doing something that either they love or they don't love, but just that your career in the industry can take so many different paths. And I think Brian is like a really cool example of that. So, but maybe we'll talk about WMSs in there somewhere along the way too.
Sure.
So, Brian, welcome to the Supply Chaney podcast. Could you take a few minutes and introduce the fine folks to yourself a little more?
Sure. So great to see you, Nathan. Thanks for having me on. I'm Brian Kirst. I'm currently the Chief Operating Officer at SnapFulfill. SnapFulfill, cloud-based WMS, Tier 1 WMS provider. I've been with SnapFulfill for just about 4 years now, but I've known of SnapFulfill prior to that 4 years. For 8 years, I was a customer of SnapFulfill. I was on the 3PL side of things. So a lot of experience both as a customer and now as part of the leadership team here at Snap.
I'll always say this, but I love the whole idea of people that have been the doers and the operators and the live, and walk the miles of people that are making things happen on the front lines before they go become a service provider or a vendor or solutions, folks, because then you can just relate so much better and understand kind of the pain points that your customers have. So maybe backing up a little bit more, let's talk a little bit about Brian the younger, like kind of bring out the scrapbook, the family photo album for a bit and
Sure.
catch us up with where you come from.
So you've said a lot there. You even alluded to a lot of my trajectory around, once you get in, you really can't get out of the supply chain and logistics world, because I certainly tried along my career, but always found myself coming back. So a lot of my career has been built on relationships. From my first experience in warehousing and distribution, my neighbor was working at a large watch company, a luxury watch company, and she knew I was newly in the market. And said, "Hey, they're hiring our distribution fulfillment center." I went there. I started in the shipping department and the distribution manager for the brand that I was working in. We sort of hit it off. Very much a unlikely do an odd couple for sure. But we started working very closely together, and this is the mid '90s in a company that was very tech forward. So we got a lot of exposure to WMS technology that wasn't really being utilized heavily then, AGVs and carousels and smart conveyor. Really technology forward organization, and we really learned how to do a lot with limited space and limited resources because we operated out of the fourth floor of an office building.
But when we're talking about watches, I mean, we're talking about the finished products are pretty small. So, having spent some time in semiconductor industry, I loved how our finished goods were the size of a pinhead. So we
Yeah.
didn't need a ton of space.
Yep. Well, this was one of the larger watch companies, 5 brands. I think we were shipping a couple million units per month out of this fourth floor of an office building. We were doing everything. It was all actually at the time, there was no direct to consumer. So it was all retail fulfillment. So all of your EDI into your major department stores. This is the mid '90s. So malls were still a thing. For you young kids out there, you can Google what a mall was. So we were shipping heavily into those space. So I really grew up learning about operations and warehousing and effective process in that environment, both inbound, outbound. I was actually responsible for all inbound activities, so quality control and replenishment and all of that, all of those operations, as well as returns and reverse logistics. So it took that experience and then moved into jewelry manufacturing. So I stayed within the sort of luxury space and went into jewelry manufacturing on the operations side. Worked with this same individual. We partnered together. We were hired to kind of transform this operation, bring some technology into it from a software perspective, and really help scale the business a bit. And did that for a couple of years, and then uh, we were approached. I say we because again, we worked together at 5 different organizations, and that story will sort of unfold as we get into my 3PL. But we were approached to take our logistics experience and apply it to technology, software. So a complete departure. But this financial market data company had made an acquisition of a much larger organization. And they really need to streamline processes. And they thought, well, who better to do that than folks that do that for a living in the logistics operations space? So we found ourselves for several years working ultimately in the financial industry, downtown Manhattan, Wall Street area. It was a very interesting experience. But like you said, the draw of logistics and operations was there, and a few acquisitions after that. It was a very short period of time, just about 2-3 years. I found myself back in the 3PL space, or the operations space on the 3PL side. So from that point, I worked for several different 3PLs based in New Jersey. Towards the tail end of one of those, I started to realize some of the gaps in process, some of the gaps in just how folks were servicing the e-com space. So this is now early 2011, 12, that time period, and we saw an opportunity to create a different model. So that same individual and I left our 3PL that we were working at, and we co-founded our first 3PL called Total Reliance. It was as bootstrapped as a 3PL could be. We were operating out of a sublease, 20,000 feet of space, some leaking ceilings, and my dad was helping manage the floor. We had one employee out there. Um, we started looking for WMS, and knowing from our experience in the space that the WMS was sort of the core, that's the engine that's going to drive profitability. It's going to drive our ability to bring customers in. So we took that search very seriously, looked at about 20, 25 different WMSs, and we made an initial selection, and we went into implementation with a pretty well-known WMS, and it unraveled very quickly. They really didn't seem to understand what our needs were. The handoff from the sales process to the project process just wasn't effective. We felt like we were being forced into their script rather than really hearing what we were trying to do. So we unraveled that agreement, went back out to market, and I met SnapFulfill. It was not super early for them. They were a couple of years in the U.S. They had the SnapFulfill as a product launched in about 2007. They came to US in 2010. We were the first 3PL in North America to sign with SnapFulfill. So the interesting thing about SnapFulfill is, they always talk about their domain expertise, or we always talk about our domain expertise, with folks like me at the organization. But, the individual that sold SnapFulfill to me at the time was just one of their sales executives in the US. He's now our chief revenue officer here in North America. And the first demo I received was from someone, Smitha Raphael, our chief product officer. So at the time, they're both, double-digit years at SnapFulfill. I feel like a new person still, just at 4 years. But that expertise, they really know the space. They really know the product. We did one demo with them, and they hit all the right notes. Not only that, but they delivered on every promise. It was, we said we needed to be live quickly. They said they could get us live in 6 weeks. 4 weeks into the implementation, we informed them that we had found a new facility and we were moving, and we were still live in 6 weeks, which was pretty impressive. So we stayed, with SnapFulfill. We expanded Total Reliance from that small 20,000 square feet into multi-site operation nationwide within 2 years. So we went from 4 users when we started to close to 100 users within 24 months. We were very lucky. We were acquired in 2017. Not really our plan, but we had run out of space. And the way things go in our industry, we sublet some space from another 3PL down the road. They saw what we were doing, made a call back to their home office in China, which we were surprised to find out, and we were acquired by a Chinese logistics company called Best Logistics in 2018. So we stayed on through the transition mid 2018, and then we exited uh, towards the end of 2018, and then at the end of 2019, we said we hadn't had enough yet. So we co-founded our second 3PL based in New Jersey. With right out of the gate, we had a site New Jersey, we had Reno, Nevada, and then a few months after launch, we opened Kansas City. So just in time for COVID, we were extremely busy. We onboarded customers at a rapid pace, and really with that one, the day we signed the lease on our first building, I called SnapFulfill and asked them to send me a contract. And there, it was not even, we didn't even go through a search that time. So we immediately deployed SnapFulfill. For this deployment, we were I think we were the first 3PL that they allowed access to their rules engine, which is a huge differentiator now. Almost all the 3PLs utilizing SnapFulfill have some level of self-configuration access. So it was a huge differentiator for us, especially during that COVID time when a lot of things were happening remotely. We were able to self-configure. Customers needed to move quickly. So if you were a 3PL and you could onboard somebody very quickly, you were going to accelerate your sales. So at one point we did about 24 customers in 6 weeks, where it was just constant onboarding, signing and onboarding, a move in, and everything from straightforward products, to consumer products, electronics. We had packaged food, so we're doing lot control and expiry and production tracking. So really complex onboardings, not just straight product in, product out kind of stuff. So I stayed with research until the end of 2021, and really pure exhaustion and just changes in the business. I started to think about possibly making a move and changing things up, at least stepping away from day to day oversight of the operation. And within a week of me having that conversation with my business partner, SnapFulfill approached me and asked if I'd join, and the timing was right. And so I've been with Snap since January 2022. So that's sort of the trajectory, and sort of the history of how I arrived here.
I knew there was some kind of interesting, fun story there, but no idea that was wow. Yeah,
And
that's
so,
wow.
and just to, one of the things, we were extremely successful, both 3PLs, very fortunate, the customers we had, and we never really had an active sales force. So people always ask, well, how did you get customers like, Unique Products and Poppin and Colgate Palmolive and people like that? These really recognizable names. And it was really all relationships, building our relationships, and even how we grew the business. And I think in our industry, relationships are key. Yeah, you're going to always have your competitors, but in most cases, it's friendly competition, because we're all doing in the same space, in the same industry, and striving for the same things. And I think we've done a really good job of always trying to keep positive interactions, and helping, even if it's another 3PL, if we have an opportunity doesn't fit us, passing that along to somebody else. It just really helps. And even building our team here at Snap, since I've arrived, there's multiple individuals on the US team that are former Resurge or Total Reliance employees. So we do look to have that domain expertise, that applied knowledge of the product. Yeah, if you're working in a warehouse and you think that's the end game for you, there are many avenues you can take in supply chain to sort of follow your career path or enhance your career path or find a different way to take advantage of the skills you have.
Here, here, because in my past, I was this person putting together and starting up 3PL distribution centers and warehouses, and now I talk to people with a microphone and a camera for part of how I make a living, right? So, yeah, that the hot, sweaty sort of days in warehouses, you can stay in that environment as long as you want to, but to your point, Ryan, there's so much more you can do. But I think having that foundational baseline knowledge is really good for being a launch pad for whatever else you might want to go in life. Um, in most typical podcasts, everyone would be like, great, now let's go talk about SnapFulfill and what makes y'all different. But I would actually like to try to peel back the layer just a second, because I know you're in the New York City metropolitan area in New Jersey, and you mentioned New Jersey a while ago for where your first sites were. But where did you grow up? And what was your another one I've been asking lately that's been getting a lot of traction was like, what was your first job?
That's a first job ever. um,
Can you
yeah,
think back?
yeah. So first job ever. So I'm from New Jersey, born and raised in North Jersey, Hudson County, town called Kearney. Woke up New York City skyline every day. So I grew up in Kearney, New Jersey. My first job was working in a supermarket. So all roads lead back to handling product.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even the glamorous cashier work. I didn't really love interacting with customers. I was doing the stock and inventory and all the things that I ended up doing. But from there, I mean, I went off to school and didn't really work much in college. But right out of college, first job right out of college was in a distribution center, and that wasn't really my plan. But what I did like and continue to like about our space is really the challenges from day to day. It's not repetitive. It doesn't become routine. You're really always faced with new challenges, new opportunities, and it's an industry that's constantly moving forward. You don't get much stagnation in supply chain, and more specifically in warehousing. There's always some new avenue to look at, some new way to view things, some new software, some new tech, or even just new approaches to manual processes. Even it's always a new challenge. It's what I liked about having and working in 3PLs, and then owning and operating 3PLs. Every day you walked in, it was something new, something different. And so that's what really, even having those opportunities outside of the space, what brought me back was that drive to always be challenged. Always, it keeps you fresh. Keeps that idea muscle flexed and well worked. So that's what I like about it.
Man, that's so fun. The number of people that I've talked with there's one person whose parents had like a PVC, a plumbing supply company, and his first ever jobs was like doing the inventory reconciliation and checking inventory out in the warehouse for his parents, plumbing supply company. Now he runs, a inventory and management sort of business that he's started. So it's so cool to see some of those very first influences of someone's career just kind of weave themselves back into someone's career path.
Yeah.
Um, Speaking of having to be continuously improving and always kind of like improving and modifying and staying up with the times, let's talk a little bit about SnapFulfill and kind of how you all approach that. Because I've got to say, admittedly, whenever I talk to a 3PL operator or anyone in the warehouse space, I inevitably try to ask, what WMS do you use? And it's very rare that I hear like the same answer back, with any sort of a year apart. If someone might say SnapFulfill today, it'll be a year from now before I might hear another SnapFulfill. And in the meantime, there's 100 other ones that I hear back
Yeah,
with no repetition. So there's no shortage of competition in the space.
that's
So
right.
can you kind of like, with that lens, talk a little bit about y'all's approach and how you make things different?
Yeah, you're right. It is a bit of a crowded space, especially that sort of mid market, warehousing. So your mid market brands and 3PLs. There's a lot of options, and there's a lot of noise, for lack of a better term. So we really try to differentiate ourselves a few ways. We do lean heavily into our expertise in the space. The company Synergy Logistics has been around for 50 years. We've had other products in the space. SnapFulfill came in 2006, 2007 as one of the first cloud WMSs. It was at a time when people didn't think you could put critical software in the cloud, but our founder saw an opportunity to create not only a cloud WMS, but one that deploys quickly, one that is highly configurable, low code, and so SnapFulfill was born out of that. So for the last nearly 20 years, we've been continuing to add features to SnapFulfill to the base functionality, but then also within those four walls, giving customers that tier one functionality, but then starting to really give them extended capabilities that are important to warehouse operators. The ability to self-configure with our rules engines, our business and workflow rules engines, the ability to configure your own reports and your own documents and labels, having that all embedded within SnapFulfill is a huge differentiator for us. And then partnering with folks like Reveal to offer BI and real time analytics, and fully customizable views, that our customers use to make real time informed decisions. Those extended capabilities are really what's starting to differentiate or continue to differentiate us in the space. So we're doing all that. These aren't modules that you have to pay extra for. This is all one license fee. You get access to all of the features of SnapFulfill, all of the core functionality, all the extended capabilities, including business and workflow self-configuration. These are all areas that a lot of our competitors or a lot of other providers in the space might look to upcharge for or add in professional services. So what we're really trying to do is keep that total cost of ownership down, make those costs predictable for the customer, um, give them the ability to maximize their efficiencies with the system through those rules engines without having to add more licenses, add more users. And so we've been very effective at that. That's been our focus. And in addition, we know where the space is going. We know the mid market is starting to automate more. They have to deal with issues like labor scarcity. They need automation. Automation prices costs are coming down. So we created Snap Control back in 2023, 2022 to orchestrate all of that automation in the warehouse. So it's an extension of SnapFulfill. It takes an agnostic approach to the automation in the warehouse. We can deploy very quickly. If it's a technology we haven't seen before, a partner we haven't seen before, we typically can set that up in about 20 days, and have that orchestrating. And the difference between why we say orchestrate, not just integrate, is it's kind of conversational. So if we're sending work down to an automation that is at its capacity, or maybe it's gone down, or maybe you have a fleet of AMRs and somebody didn't charge them, we can redirect that work either automatically by setting certain limits within our rules engine, or with a few button clicks, take that work back and send it to an RF device or a different automation to handle it. So the work streams start to become a lot more flexible, a lot more orchestrated, rather than just pushing work to a partner device through an integration, hoping that it gets done and that those messages come back into SnapFulfill with the updates. We're able to have that sort of bi-directional communication.
I like it. Yeah, makes a lot of sense for some of those cases that you mentioned there. Um, I'm curious. You've said mid market, and you've talked some 3PLs. Can we talk a little bit about like who is your ideal customer, like in terms of orders, size, locations? Is it 3PL? Is it manufacturers and retailers themselves? Kind of like, can you paint a picture of like your ideal customer?
Yeah. So I mean, generally speaking, there's no warehouse use case for SnapFulfill where we would say that's not a fit. So we have when I started with SnapFulfill. I started with 4 users and 20,000 square feet, and then we scaled. The nice thing about SnapFulfill is it does scale. So if you're an operator and you have an eye on growth and you don't want to have to change WMSs in 5 years, which was sort of what was in my head. I've been through a few WMS transitions. It's not easy. Um, SnapFulfill really makes it easy to enter a tier one market, a tier one provider, and then scale. So we're very flexible as our system is with configurability and all of that. We're pretty flexible on the commercial side to get if somebody wants SnapFulfill, and we're not talking about offering crazy discounts or anything, but we'll structure a commercial model that works for the trajectory of their business. And so that, again, another reason SnapFulfill was very attractive to me. Not only the first time, but the second time, I already knew they were going to be a good partner. We had just a great experience with them in a going from one customer to 65 customers in 24 months. It was just a really good experience. So, and a lot of times I speak to that in some of the sales cycles that the guys are in. But ideally, a customer that or a prospect that is, hey, that's a solid fit. That's going to be a really good customer. We're going to be a really good fit for them. They're going to be a really good fit for us. Is that mid market? So, 3PLs, retail, digital brands. In that, those are our biggest deployments. If you have multiple warehouses, so multi-site operations. If you're doing, there's no real. We have customers doing tens of thousands of shipments a day to hundreds of shipments a day. And then, we have some folks doing 1 million shipments a week. So it's really all over the map because it depends on, are they direct to consumer? Are they retail? Or, it's all over the place. But that ideal, customer for us is really that mid-market, 3PL, digital brand, retail manufacturing. That's where we see the bulk of our deployments. And that's who really gets the most benefit from SnapFulfill, because they're usually either on another WMS and they're sort of graduating to more of a tier one. They have the capability to do a lot of the self configuration. We have a support team, a customer success team, an account management team that will gladly support a smaller operation that can't do their own configurations and their own rules setup, create their own reports. We take that on with our support team and our customer success team. That's not a problem. It's these companies and organizations that have an eye on growth. They really want to control their own destiny. That's where we become really attractive. That's really that ideal customer for us. Folks who have a strong IT infrastructure, where they have some engineers on staff. They really like SnapFulfill because they can pull all of that into their internal team. They control the cost. They control the timelines. They don't have to rely on us or our development team or our teams to do those configurations or write those reports. They're doing it all on their timelines. That's really attractive to them. So we see a lot of mid market 3PLs especially. I mean, if you're 4 or 5 site 3PL, we also have 20 site 3PLs, but that where you have an eye on growth, maybe you're in acquisition mode, maybe you're adding sites and customers. That's where we see a lot of value with Snap.
And not necessarily just domestically here in the U.S., I think, right? What's y'all's footprint like beyond U.S. borders?
So we're actually the company is headquartered in the UK. So our development team, support team, they all sit at our company headquarters in the UK, where we also have a fulfillment operation as well, where we do a lot of R&D and testing. We have a 3PL there, up in the Midlands in the UK. And then, so we have UK, EU, North America, and we have a couple sites in Southeast Asia, and we're actually right now deploying a site in Japan. So we do have a bit of a global presence.
Nice. There's one thing that I have not heard you say, and it's hard to go in any room, podcast, conference, or anything these days without someone talking about AI. And I haven't heard you mention it explicitly yet. But so just I'll kind of get the softball question is here: is AI somewhere in your mix, or like how are you all treating that?
Yeah, the short answer, I have to be careful here for a lot of reasons. Um, AI is definitely in the mix. We see the importance of it, and we see the use cases of it in a few different areas. How that works within SnapFulfill and the existing SnapFulfill ecosystem, that's something for a later podcast. But it is top of mind and keeping us very busy at this moment for sure.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll unpack that one on a different day, episode number 2. Um, all right. So there's I think a big part of the folks that listen to my podcast are 3PL operators. And I feel like I liken the idea of like fulfillment companies kind of popping up pretty quickly, because I think just the barriers to entry of becoming a 3PL these days are pretty low. I liken it to the craft brewery boom of just like, there was like Coors and Miller and Shiner, and then it was on every corner now. You
Yep.
have a brewery, right? And so I'm like, this feels there's some parallels here or something like so.
Interesting.
Um, any words of advice, or from your perspective of someone who's been around the block a time or two, in starting up 3PL operations, and now obviously helping those companies. Yeah, words of advice for those folks that are in that 3PL operations space.
Yeah, yeah, we could go on for a bit.
Within 5 minutes, give or
Yeah,
take.
yeah. So as you're starting up, I mean, really, the key is know the initial path you want to be on. Don't try to be all things to all of your customers, or you will find yourself disappointing some customers. I could tell you when we started Total Reliance, we had a model that we said we're going to focus on higher touch, higher end goods. We felt like at the time, if folks needed a little bit of more high touch, they were struggling to find good providers. So we really made that our differentiator. And sure, we had some basic pick, pack, ship operations, but most of our customers required some level of additional touch. Whether it's assembly and kitting, whether it was just. I mean, we had a customer who was selling high end leather goods, and the CEO believed that every sale was a gift, even if you're buying it for yourself. So everything had to be gift wrapped. So that was sort of our specialization, but we were able to grow a solid business around that. So I would say, kind of, if you're starting out, know what your sort of ICP is, know what your model is going to be, and then try and stay focused on that, and don't deviate too much too soon. Also, make sure you have systems that are flexible. And this is specifically for a 3PL. If you're a brand, you want to go buy a rigid system, that's fine. You'll set it up once. You might not look at it again for a while. A 3PL, every new customer can be viewed as a new implementation. The requirements will be different. What you need from your technology, whether it's your WMS, your TMS, if you have automation, what the requirements will be from customer to customer are going to be different. So you want to make sure you have that flexibility, and that flexibility isn't going to cost you, a lot of professional services to get there. Subtle nod to SnapFulfill there. It was one of our differentiators for sure at both of my 3PLs. But those are two really big areas, because what your customer is doing today as a 3PL is likely not what they're going to be doing a year from now. And that could be as simple as, hey, we have this really good e-com company. They're doing, 5,000 orders a month and growing. And a year from now, they want to get into brick and mortar. And now I have to figure out retail compliance, and I've never done that before. And now do they have to get another provider, or are you going to be a one-stop shop? Be prepared to broaden your service offering for your customers. There's a lot. It's easier. Well, you make a really good comparison to craft breweries, because as a guy who likes his craft breweries, there are a lot of them, but there are only a few good ones. So try and be one of the good ones, and really, you're the last touch of your customer's products before it goes to their consumer or their customer. That's a huge amount of trust. Take it seriously and really deliver on your promises. That's what I would tell 3PL providers.
All right. I like it. I like it. Anytime we can sneak in some beer talk into a podcast about supply chain stuff, it's a good day.
Absolutely.
Another one here, just try to pull out a couple more just sound bites of wisdom out of you here is, do you have a motto or a quote or just one of those things that, you like put on the wall and read every day on those, the hard days, the easy days, the thing that you resort to, you know, do you have one of those?
I do not. No.
Okay.
No, I'm
um,
not one of those guys at all.
Okay. Okay. So when times are tough, what do you lean on? What helps you get through that, that peak period in a warehouse where the pipe is leaking in the roof and, like how gets you through the next day?
And that's a good question. And what I found, what really this might sound a little, having the right people around you, and having fun through some of those challenges. I used to tell folks, and it would be stressful. We're not getting the orders out. Someone running around can't find that last piece, and it was, hey, there are some people who are shipping mission critical things, and we're not doing that. If you can't find that last piece of apparel for that order, no one's going to lose their life over it. Let's just relax and really trying to keep that sort of lighter environment, and low stress as much as possible. But that only worked because of working with good people. And so I would say, make sure the folks you're working with, you kind of match your vibe, or at least complement you, so you could balance it out.
Right. Fair enough. Fair enough. I'm sure there's a quote probably that talks about having the right people around you. we'll
Probably.
go we'll go look at I'll chat GPT it and send you some options you can
There you go.
print
I'll
out
put
and
it
put
right
up
up
on the
on the
wall.
wall over here. You don't want to see what's on that wall. It's very telling about my other personality. This is the plain vanilla wall.
All right. Looks good. Looks good. Sounds good to me. Well, Brian, maybe just here in the last minute or so, just any like kind of final thoughts before we wrap up this episode of the podcast.
I appreciate you having me on. Of course, it's always been always a pleasure seeing you, and appreciate what you've been doing. I think we're in a really exciting time in supply chain right now. All of the uncertainty, all of the challenges that the industry is being faced with, from tariffs to labor to all of these things, that it usually ends up being the catalyst for a lot of positive change, either through technology advancements or even through just how we're staffing and labor relations and things like that. It's usually these times when we're a little bit uncertain that we see really nice progress in the space. So as stressful it is for folks, know that this is a time for change. So speak up. Try and make those changes. Deploy automation when you maybe a little earlier than you planned on, and really push the limits of what we can do as an industry. I'm looking forward to seeing how things play out.
That goes for you and me both, Brian. So I'll be cheering along from the sidelines on this side of the microphone. So good to have you on today. Thanks for sharing some of your wisdom. Enjoyed hearing your story of trying as hard as you could to get out of logistics, but it just kept pulling you back in. So
couldn't love it more. I am happy it happened this way, and I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Nathan.
All right. Thanks, Brian. Catch you later.
Take care.